Hey Kelly, this is Matt Philleo here in the studio. Just want to do a quick critique on your portrait of Stan, and thank you so much for sending that in to have it critiqued. I really appreciate you taking the time for that, and I think this will really help bring it to the next level. And you had asked, you had a question about the mouth specifically, if you thought that was off, but first I'd like to go over a couple of things. I just want to say excellent job. Looking at it, this really does look so much like the guy in the photo. And so you've done a really good job here in using the grid technique. And so I want to give you a virtual high five here and just say you really did great. Very, very pleased with the quality here. Just from the realism to the likeness, specifically, I like the shape of his head. I like the way you drew the hair in. The shape of the ear is very true to what I see here in the photo. The look of the eyes, the expression in the face. It really captures the essence of who he is. So very, very good. And as far as things to do to improve it, I'll first address the mouth because that was the area you had a question about. And so the first thing I saw, and I had to pull it up and really make these pictures big enough to see the difference. I was looking at it on my iPhone and I couldn't tell from that, but here on the computer I can really see it. At first glance, you had it done very well. I mean, you have the shape of his mouth suggested pretty accurately, but what I think you might be missing is the definition of two different shapes. So the first shape is the shape of his actual lip. And you see that right here represented by the darker area. You have, his lips are very thin and there's a little bit of the upper lip showing right here. And that's very faint, very hard to tell where it begins and ends. It's a little easier to see where his lower lip begins and ends. And I see the definition here by the darker color. But then there's also another element of his lip, and that's the shadow below it. So you have this strong highlight right here, and then you have a shadow beneath that, which it could possibly be, his teeth protruding out as he smiles with his mouth closed, part of his jawbone. I'm not sure exactly what's causing that highlight, or it could just be part of the flesh as it juts out when he smiles, but that's his look. And so he has this highlight here, and then he has a strong shadow underneath. And with what you drew in his lip, I'm not sure if that line was meant to represent this thinner part of his actual lip here, or the shadow of this puffy area of the flesh below. I really can't tell with what you drew. So what you want to do, Kelly, is make sure you define both of those elements. And the way you do that is probably to erase the line you have, because it seems as if it's representing this lower shadow here. But if it is, it's probably not down far enough. So you'd want to erase this line completely and just define what would be his actual lip. Now, you said that this is very, very close to the grid line, and I think I can see the grids very, very faintly in the picture here. It looks as if it's slightly below the grid line, and you're fine. The grid line is just a benchmark. I don't have the actual photo here. Well, you have it taped up on your canvas, but I can still see it even without that. So, like I say, what you'd want to do is redefine this line. And another thing too is very, very faintly, I think the angle, you might have the angle off just a little bit on the crease of his mouth, and that'd be the actual line right here where his mouth would open up. I think it goes like this, and then it tilts up at just a slight angle. And whereas you have it a little more flat across, I think it actually goes up a little higher on this side, just a bit. And then as far as the shape of that upper lip, you could leave it kind of nebulous, kind of ambiguous. But you really want to change the angle of this crease just a little bit. And then getting back to the lower lip, like I said, after you have this erased, you'll want to draw just that part of the lip, the pink part you see, and it's going to come down. It'll be slightly thicker than the top part of the lip. And so follow exactly what you see in the photo, which I know, you know, it's, you don't have as much of a guideline because the grids only give you the basic proportions of the face, but just follow really what you see as much as you can. And then you'll want to go down and capture this shadow, and don't make it a really defined line like you did here. Just use some kind of sketching techniques, more like what you did with the hair, you know, or even by his neck, those shadows. Use some of those kind of sketchy lines, and then just suggest the shadow that you see right here, and you'll have those two different lines represented. So start very faint at first and get a little bit darker, but you're not going to want to make that shadow too prominent, but just enough so that you know that's there. So that should really help you with his mouth. Also pay attention to a couple of these other wrinkles. You have this main crease underneath the nose that everybody has, but as people get older, they do get these secondary wrinkles as well. And so you might want to capture just a couple of those, and that might make, it'll probably make him look more like he's smiling. The smile is partially achieved by the mouth, the shape of the mouth. It's also achieved by the wrinkles around the nose and cheeks. So you want to pay attention to those as well. Make sure you capture the definition of this crease here, coming down from his nose through his cheek. You want to make sure that kind of goes down far enough. I mean, it is thinner and fainter, but it is there, so you'd want to capture that part. This crease right here coming from his mouth is more curved than what you have. You made a very straight line, but if you notice, it has a gradual curve. And you want to capture that because that will show kind of the jowls, the part of his jawline and fleshy area, and give it some dimension. And I think, again, it'll help increase the look of his smile a little more too. So you want to capture that. I like how you have the wrinkles in around his eyes, and those wrinkles around the eyes are so important in capturing the look of a smile. But what I see looking at it is you want to make that just a bit more prominent, representing this first line here, the second line there, another line here. These crow's feet wrinkles are very important to capture. So take a little time and redefine those areas. Get this cross line going perpendicular to the other ones. Capture that one. So you have all these horizontal lines, and you have this vertical line, and you want to capture all of those. And then do the same also on this eye on the right. There's all those lines here, and there's also a vertical as well that you want to capture right there. And there's also one more line coming up here, going like that. Make sure that you don't make them all the same distance apart from each other, which our brain is always trying to order everything. We're always trying to make everything spaced evenly, whereas in nature, things are very, very random. So you'll notice this line up here is spaced farther apart from that one than these lines down here. So just make sure you capture that and pay attention to that. And then also the eyes are very important, the shapes of the eyes. Looking at his face, I think you have the pupils, the irises, whatever you want to call them. The actual eyeballs themselves are too large. If you look at, you know, his eyeball here, it's quite a bit smaller. So sometimes you can match it up against other features of the face to get an idea as a benchmark. I'll take the eyeball size sometimes and compare it to the width of the nose. And if I were just to take that eyeball and put it up against his nose, it would look just like a jewel almost on his nose. Whereas if I were to take this eyeball out, it would cover almost the whole thing. So just as a benchmark, you want to decrease the size of his eyeballs a little bit. Also pay attention to the shape. And see on this side here on the actual photo, it's rounded, and I can see the roundness of his eyeball, whereas the way you drew it, it's very much straight up and down. And so because of that, it looks like his eyeball is very, very large, like it would, cover that much of his face. So you want to round that off and make it smaller. Make this one smaller as well. So that's another thing I noticed. His eyebrows, I think, should be a little bit thicker. So a little bit thicker. Possibly this part should go up a little higher. And eyes and eyebrows are very, very important in capturing a likeness. So you'll want to pay attention to that. I think he got the shape of the nose done very well. Possibly this little crease here by the cheek and nose area, it could extend up a little higher. But I think overall the proportions you got were very accurate. I think that you could probably draw in that nasal bone of his nose a little more and just suggest where that'll go a little bit more, so that as you paint it, you'll know what's happening and you don't have really, really strong shadows in this picture. Although I like the picture, it shows the detail very well. You don't have a very strong light source. It's very muted. So it'll be important to know, where you're going as you paint this. And if you can even capture a little of the shadows in with your pencil, that might be helpful, like in his temple area by the head, just to figure out, okay, because this line will be very important for you when you start painting. And if you can determine where it is now in the sketch, that's going to really help you a lot in knowing where to go in the painting process. So I would determine that now as you sketch it. And then something to pay attention to as well, Kelly, would be because this wrinkle is going, on one part of the head. How can I explain this? The shadow represents a change in the contour of his head. It's, it's rounded and not completely round, but this dimension on the side is a different dimension than what we see right here. So basically what it means is this line on the wrinkle of his forehead goes at a different angle than this one, as well as with this one here. So you want to make sure that you capture that different angle right here. So after you determine where the shadow is going to be for the temple of his head, you'll want to change the angles of those wrinkles just a little bit. And so that would be the main thing. I mean, we could talk a little bit about the shadows under the neck and that kind of thing. Oh, one more thing I did notice that you want to change, and I noticed that before I got into the video here. His cheek actually, and this might help his smile to look more smile-ish. His cheek should be wider on this side. If you notice in the photo, see how round that is? Whereas you have it very, very sharply angled. It's very straight, but in the photo, it's much more round and it sticks out further. And I did look at your grid and seeing, this square here, and then noticing where the edge of his face, of his cheek on the right side, where it falls between the area in the square. I see it goes actually past the halfway point. It goes just a little past the halfway point. And if I see your grid line somewhere, it's really hard to tell here, but somewhere right here, I think, you have it going not even all the way up to the halfway point. So you'd want to kind of look where the halfway point is, and it should go a little past that to give you an idea how wide that cheek should be. So thicken its cheek, make it more round, and that'll also help the smile too. Another thing I see is his chin has a little more of an angle right here, a little bit of a kind of a depression there, a little curvature. And it goes up at an angle like so, whereas you have it very much flat across. And that's something that we have to fight all the time as artists, is that tendency again to order things and even making things lined up symmetrically and, you know, flat across and vertical, all those things. We're always doing that with our mind. So you always need to fight against that and draw, you know, what you see instead of what you think you see. And I struggle with that too. But again, this angle right here is what you're going for. So it's maybe like a, I don't know, 20-degree angle. You could do what one of our students did. She actually took a piece of tape and she taped off against the angles, like with a piece of painter's tape, you know, like the blue painter's tape that comes off really easily. She taped up the angle so she could see it better. If that helps you, you could actually take a piece of tape and just tape across the angle here so you can see it. You could do that on the mouth as well if that helps you. But again, you want to get that angle a little more steep on this chin. Anyway, I think this would be enough changes for you to go by. And yeah, there maybe one last change, and it's very, very slight. Just round off the hairline just a hair. I mean, he does kind of have that angle in his head, but he might have that angle just a bit too straight. And I think there's a little more of a roundness here by his hairline. So I would just erase a little bit in there to the hair, just to get some more roundness in his head. Just a little bit though. So I think doing just these things I've mentioned will make a huge, huge difference in the sketch. And if your sketch is as accurate as it can be, the painting will be that much better. Or there'll be less work that you have to do in the painting process to compensate for any inaccuracies in the sketch. So anyway, hope this helps, Kelly, and let me know if you have any other questions about it. I know I gave you probably a little more than you were hoping for or expected that you'd get in the critique. But I know you had questions just about the mouth. But I just give you the information and you do whatever you'd like with it. You can utilize as little or as much as what I've shared with you. So great work, and look forward to seeing what you do with, you know, the sketch and finishing it off, and then also what you do in the painting process. So thanks again, and have a blessed day, and we'll talk to you soon.